acclaimed novelist, but a native Roman, and those two do not always come together. Miss Sumner is a graduate of Darling School, and she received her BA from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and her MFA from Boston University. Her diverse teaching and writing background includes time spent as a Peace Corps volunteer, an English instructor in Senegal, writing instructor and workshop leader in Taos, New Mexico, and 2 years as the writer in residence at her alma mater, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. She's currently an associate professor of English at Shorter College, and she's also the visiting writer during this academic year at Thayer College. Her short fiction and creative nonfiction work has appeared in numerous journals and anthologies, including the New Stories from the South, The Year's Best in 1994 and 2000, The New Yorker, Harper's Magazine, and the New York Times Sophisticated Traveler. Her first novel, Polite Society, won the Whiting Award in 1996. Her most recent novel, The School of Beauty and Charm, was published in 2001 and went into its second printing in 2003. Those of you who have read that novel will remember the fascinating Peppers family, who, as the narrator put it, were white, not albino or Swedish or anything like that, but regular white. I think that will give you a little flavor of the novel, which is very funny and wonderful. And if you haven't read it, we have it available here for purchase at the end of the evening. It's also the Berry Bookstore located for a while. Tonight, Ms. Sumner will be reading a new short story titled Killing the Cat, which will be published in Tricord. We are very happy to have her.
I'm trying to figure out some of these microphones real quick.
Okay, microphone.
We know you're not now.
It's powering up. It seems like it's all. Are things happening up there?
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, me neither. Okay.
Does anyone know how?
Doing something, it's just not out.
What's in that little black box that Charlie sent us that
This stuff here? Really high tech. Science. Could everyone hear Dr. Singh?
Yeah, but we should just test
We could
it.
gather.
Why could we,
Yeah.
could you all move here so we can just sort of be here?
Oh. No, nobody's because they got to do the camera. It's okay. It's not a big deal.
Oh, yeah. You know it. I'm going to be like, if I can't figure it out, you can do it, you know? Like, if I can't figure it out, you can do it.
All right, I love it. This is fun. Thank you for inviting me to read. I'm having a wonderful time teaching fiction writing here at there. And, my students are really neat. I always tell people that one day I didn't make it to class. I was sick, and they had class without me, which I found impressive. And I was a little hurt, but it's okay. I'm going to read a story that I have not read yet, but I think it's my favorite story. I mean, I wrote it, but I haven't really looked at it since then. And I think it's probably the best thing I've written, but I don't know. And actually, my printer broke down today, and I had a terrible time getting it out on the page. I believe all the pages are here. But it came out in that funny-looking email print because I pasted it on to email and mailed it to myself in another location, etc. So I'm going to just warm up with a little short that's published in Parker's. This was published in the October 2003 magazine. It's called Marriage. Every night, she told the marriage counselor, he drinks a glass of milk. When he's finished, he sets the empty glass on the kitchen counter and goes to bed. He does not rinse it out. I have asked him and asked him. I've asked nicely, and I've screamed. Why should I rinse his glass out for him every night? If I don't do it, it's the first thing I see in the morning, this disgusting milk scum. I've even asked him, will you just put the glass in the sink? But he won't. The counselor looked at the husband, a balding, middle-aged man who sat with his hands in his lap, a pleasant expression on his face. Did you hear what she was saying? Asked the counselor. Yes, said the man, nodding first at him and then at his wife to acknowledge everyone present. A moment of silence passed. The counselor made a note on his pad, reminding himself to pick up a gallon of milk after work. Then he made eye contact with the wife. There is something you need to understand, he said. He will never, never stop drinking that glass of milk before he goes to bed, and he will never rinse it out. There is absolutely nothing you can do. The woman looked surprised. Sometimes, even after the divorce, she would think about the counselor's words, marveling at his wisdom. All right, this is the newbie. That story, by the way, is a story that a friend told me, and I need to send this to her. I haven't seen her in a couple of years, but I'd like to send it to her. Some people ask writers where they get their stories. It's one of my ex-husbands. This story is called Killing the Cat. In 2 days, Ollie had bagged it all up, his life with Kate, and called the Salvation Army to haul it away. Take the furniture, too, he told the man at the door, a hulking, bearded fellow wearing a ponytail and a leather jacket with "Real Men Love Jesus" stitched across the back. The man looked across the sea of plastic bags. On top of the pile, Narnia yowled inside a pet carrier. You moving? Take the cat, said Ollie. Leave the dog. We don't take no pets. He fingered the stiff lavender ribbon of a potted mom with a sympathy card speared into the soil. With the toe of his boot, he nudged a bulging corrugated box. Then he bent over and sniffed. We don't take no food, no garbage, no pets. It's a good ham, said Ollie. There's a green bean casserole in there, too. I dumped the garbage. The man narrowed his eyes on something poking out of a bag, an acrylic leg brace covered with smiley face stickers. I ain't going through all them sacks. He hooked his thumbs into the front corner pockets of his tight jeans and leaned back, sizing Ollie up. "My wife died last Monday," said Ollie. To his horror, he began to bawl in front of the stranger. She was 32 years old. She had Lou Gehrig's disease. Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, Kate had announced one afternoon, a neuromuscular disorder with a prognosis of 2 to 5 years depending on onset. Ollie cocked his head, trying to grasp the foreign words and apply them to her. She wore a pair of his Carhartt overalls over a skinny black tank. A few strands of hair had come loose from her braid, and in the humidity, curled around her face. While she rattled off statistics, diagnosed in 1 out of 50,000 people worldwide, he noticed that on the pale underside of her arm, one of the kids she taught at Montessori had left a streak of bright blue paint. She fanned glossy pamphlets across the worn scrubbed oak of their kitchen table. When she told him she had a doctor's appointment that afternoon, Ollie had assumed she was pregnant. Finally, he met her eyes. "You're going to die?" Even her tongue was paralyzed, he sobbed to the Salvation Army man, removing his tortoiseshell glasses to swipe his face with his shirt sleeve. "I'm real sorry to hear that." In the embarrassed silence, a raccoon carrying a pine cone covered with peanut butter and birdseed paused by the window and looked in. "Looks just like a bandit, don't he?" said the man. "My yard's full of them. They live along that creek, but they're all over the island. You don't watch out, they'll get in your garbage and have a real party." He removed his jacket, revealing a name tag, John. Then he flexed his tattooed arms and hoisted the mattress. Ollie shuffled out to the back deck and leaned against the railing. An early winter sun was sinking into the creek, blackening the jessamine vines that snaked through the low oaks and twisted cedars. He looked at his canoe, a battered, flat-bottomed camper moored to the water oak with a halter bend, and remembered finding the kitten just before Christmas. It was a yellow cat, damp and scrawny, mewling plaintively in the bottom of the canoe. Ollie was strictly a dog man himself, found cats to be stupid, smelly, and stuck up, but Kate loved all animals. In the back of his mind, the little tick-tock voice he hated said, "What will you do with it when she dies?" He stomped through the back door with the kitten zipped in his fishing vest, rummaged through a box of Christmas stuff, found a red bow. "You hate cats," Kate slurred when he set Narnia on her lap. The kitten slipped off her knee and hung onto the latches of her leg brace. Beneath the flannel robe and 2 pairs of thermal underwear, Kate's collarbone rose sharply, like a branch beneath a current. Her knees seemed huge. One night, half of her tongue had disappeared. In the morning, she turned her face away, but he cajoled, insisted, finally squeezed the hinge of her jaw open as if she were Dog, and he were giving her a pill. The pink tongue he loved was jagged like the edge of a bread knife. He heard John singing, "Oh, where's the ring I gave to Nancy Spain," as he rustled through the bags. He'd discovered Kate's morphine patches. The literature indicated that the disease was painless, Ollie had told a voice on the ALS hotline. "By the time the pain sets in with intensity," said the woman, "most patients can't communicate." Kate's body fell apart systematically. Left hand, left foot, left arm, left leg, right hand. Finally, her neck began to collapse, dropping her chin onto her chest. Saliva ran from the corners of her mouth as she tried to move her lips. Her skeleton was clearly visible, and her eyes seemed enormous. Her teeth remained strong, sharp, and very white. The day before she died, when Ollie hinted that he might get rid of the cat after she was gone, Kate fit halfway through the forefinger of his right hand. All during the funeral service, he'd nursed that finger, lifting the Band-Aid every few minutes to see the marvelous print of her teeth on his skin. His friend Sammy sat next to him on the pew in a suit smelling of mothballs, a Band-Aid stuck on his chin. He was green with a hangover. Ollie had quit drinking 11 years ago, so he didn't follow the wake over to Sammy's bar. He spent a few hazy hours with his in-laws and his mother. The Muschamps from Mississippi were not bad people. He'd been fond of them before Kate got sick, when they were not so much themselves as a silly, sweet part of her. He'd quickly come to realize that they held the same view of him. His own parents were shadows, father missing in action, mother weeping alcoholic, living in a peach-colored condo on Carolina Beach. Ollie left John sitting on the back of the Salvation Army trunk, wearing a morphine patch on each arm and spooning up casserole. There was nothing for him to steal. Dog, nervous about the stranger taking all their stuff, hopped gratefully into the familiar Jeep, and Ollie put the caged cat in the back. The animal shelter would be closed by now, but he could leave the pet carrier on the steps. The previous night, unable to sleep, he watched the car inside and out. Now it smelled strange and new, and his reflection bounced back at him from every angle. His short hair, dirty and uncombed, stuck up all over his head, and behind the thick lenses of his glasses, his eyes looked stark and wild. He hadn't slept through the night for 2 years, ever since Kate got sick, and he picked up the habit of driving with one eye shut, switching back and forth to keep himself awake. I could probably do this in my sleep, he thought, edging along the familiar road, past the Superette, Sammy's bar, You Do It laundromat, and the Montessori school. He let go of the steering wheel to pat the vest pocket where he had put the only things he meant to keep, a couple of photographs of Kate and a seashell she had given him one night after they watched 5 loggerhead sea turtles lay their eggs under a full moon. He sped past a row of overpriced condos, uniformly ugly things perched on stilts, landscaped with unlikely palm trees. A decade earlier, before developers attacked the Outer Banks, the turtles had swum to shore in droves. Lou Gehrig's disease, they told people, ears burning with the abashed pride of those who have important bad news. But they didn't believe it. They sought a second opinion, and a third, then a fourth. ALS, said a neurologist in Raleigh, his eyes blank. He explained the course of the disease: leg brace, walker, wheelchair, feeding tube, if the patient chose to use one, and death, by starvation if the patient didn't have a feeding tube, by suffocation if she did. Then he glanced at his clipboard and added, unusual in a woman so young. With the first glimmer of interest he'd shown during the visit, he urged Kate to participate in a study he was conducting, began to prattle on about a paper he wanted to publish. He needed data. Ollie jumped, flattened the man against the wall. Gripping his arms beneath the slippery white coat, he leaned into the pale, formless face and screamed, you die, you. A nurse fixed his bent glasses and gave him 2 Darvocet and a paper cup of water. Kate drove them home. Ollie sat in the passenger seat and stared out the window at Highway 64. He watched crows lining up on telephone wires, saw a turkey vulture circling for roadkill. He and another man in the Park Service, a tall guy named Treetop, had tagged 103 of those buzzards on the barrier islands. He knew the slow, clumsy beat of its wings spanning the height of a man, knew its knobby bare head, the fringed wingtips that looked like long fingers. He knew how it rocked in the air current as if it were part of the sky, and how its shadow fell over a quivering, injured mouse whose white feet tapped faster and faster to no avail. He'd smelled its foul breath. With a loud smack that popped the back door of the Jeep open and threw Dog into Ollie's lap, the Jeep hit a fence surrounding a new gated community called the Sandpiper. The bumper made a satisfying crunch as it folded into the fake pink stucco. I must be crazy, thought Ollie, letting his heavy eyelids close. A few minutes later, reaching for his driver's license, his hand brushed against the unbroken shell in his pocket. He told the blurred face of a police officer, my wife died. A small crowd had gathered, scraps of color against a gray sky. Patting his hand over the broken glass, On the dashboard, Ollie found his glasses and saw the pet carrier upside down on the curb, door open. A few minutes later, a long-legged girl climbed down from a palm tree with the cat in her arms. "Finders keepers," said Ollie, but the girl said her mother was allergic to cats. The officer said he didn't need another cat and drove Ollie home in the patrol car. He said it was fairly common for mourners to wreck their cars and asked Ollie to stay off the road until his head cleared. John had left Ollie a sleeping bag, a lamp, some kitchenware, a bar of soap, a toothbrush and toothpaste, a hand towel, and a broom. One clean set of clothes, khakis, flannel shirt, boxers, socks, was folded into a neat pile where the dresser used to be. The dishes were washed, the floor swept clean. Ollie looked around the empty house. He and Kate had built it right after they got married, rummaging through salvage yards for scrap lumber, a toilet, a bit of stained glass. They paid $25 for 2 deck beams from the wreck of a French man of war, $50 for the foresail that Kate sewed into curtains. Sammy helped them lay the roof, a stack of plywood, polyurethane, and mineral wool, covered with sedum turf and planted with roses. The house was only 900 square feet. They planned to add on when the baby came, but now it felt cavernous. When Kate was paralyzed, she'd sit up all night in an electric recliner. With the touch of a button, the chair could thrust her forward onto a walker that she gripped with her good hand while peeing in a bucket. This procedure worried Ollie to death, but he could not get Kate to go to bed at night. So he tied a small brass Christmas bell to the recliner and asked her to ring it if she needed him. She refused to ring the bell for herself, once Ollie had woken up to find her slumped on the floor between the chair and the walker, waiting patiently for morning. But she rang it for Narnia. Bleary-eyed, heart-pounding, Ollie would roll out of bed and stumble toward the tinkle of the bell, only to find that the cat was outside in the rain and wished to come in, or vice versa. Kate would look up at him, contrite but determined. While he was up, he adjusted the pillow behind her back, offered her sips of water that made her choke and spit, and gave her larger and larger doses of morphine. In the morning, after the nurse came to sit with Kate, Ollie drove to work with the car radio blaring to keep himself awake. Relatives had suggested that he quit his job to take care of Kate, since most of his salary went to her caretaker, but work was the only place where he could cry. He spent most of his time outdoors, sketching maps, cutting trails, tagging wildlife. Sometimes he sobbed until his ribs ached, until there was nothing left inside of him except the tick-tock voice saying, "How long can you take care of her?" One night, shortly after Kate was fitted for a feeding tube, Ollie ran over the cat. That was the summer Narnia began regular nocturnal explorations of the roof. Narnia could get on the roof somehow, but he couldn't get down without Ollie's assistance. He would traipse outside during the 11 p.m. feeding when Ollie rose to pour a can of strawberry liquid meal replacement mixed with a handful of crushed pills and several spoonfuls of morphine into the plastic tube that hung from Kate's belly. After a fruitless "kitty, kitty, here, kitty, kitty, kitty" call at the door, Ollie went back to bed. Just as he was falling asleep, the Christmas bell would ring, indicating that Narnia was stuck on the roof. Then Ollie stomped out the door, drove the Jeep around to the side yard, eased over the cypress root, and pulled up as close as he could to the house. Cursing, he'd snapped the headlights on the cat. Narnia didn't trust Ollie. He paced back and forth, paused, gave a strangled cry, and paced again. Despite himself, Ollie offered encouragement. "Come on, baby, you can do it. Jump on down there." Back and forth. Finally, when Ollie was almost asleep at the wheel, Narnia came to a decision. Hovering like a kid about to jump off the high dive, he dropped onto the hood. In daylight, Ollie could see the map of his landing scratched in the paint. Running over Narnia was an accident, but Ollie felt guilty. It was a slippery, rainy night. Under his back left tire, the cat felt like the cypress root, only bigger, and Ollie did not stop. It could have been a rock or a raccoon, but he saw that flash of yellow, the undeniable tale of Narnia. He wanted to go back to bed, but he jerked the flashlight out of the glove compartment and looked under the wheel. Nothing. The rain came in pellets, almost hail, beating on the back of his neck. On his hands and knees, wet pajamas dragging. In the mud, he scoured the yard, breaking vines with his hands, scraping all the way down to the creek, calling, "Kitty, kitty, kitty, kitty." "Come here, you damn cat," he yelled, and an owl answered, "Who cooks for you all, you all?" Inside, Kate looked at his muddy knees and asked, "What happened?" Her face strained under the weight of the words. Sweat broke out at her temple. But he wanted her to talk. He understood the slurred gibberish most of the time. He wanted her to talk about dying, to say it, "Ollie, I am dying. I am leaving you. It's over between us." "He ran off," said Ollie. She looked up at the ceiling. "I got him off the roof. He'll be back. I have to get some sleep, okay?" She said she was sorry. He felt like shit. That night he dreamed that he was a great horned owl with a triangular face like a cat, swooping, his talons like knives in the warm fur. The Christmas bell woke him up. At the door stood Narnia, a slightly beat cat, nothing you could put your finger on, no broken bone, no blood, nothing to announce, "I've been hit by a car. Ollie tried to kill me." Kate was concerned, thought he'd been in a fight. When Ollie woke up in the sleeping bag, he discovered a pile of cat poop on his clean set of clothes. He kept going to the phone to call Kate, forgetting that she was dead. He remembered the few times she'd gone off the island without him. First, there was the sweet liberty of being alone in the house. He left dirty dishes in the sink, farted when he felt like it, and played the stereo too loud. Sometimes he let Dog sleep on the bed with him. Then, slowly, he would feel her terrible absence. He paced the floors, opened books without reading them, lost his appetite. When the phone rang, he jumped, and at the sound of her voice, his groin tightened. They would talk themselves out, down to the nub of words, hanging on with nothing to say, just to hear each other's voices. That afternoon, Narnia hooked her claws into Dog's nostril, drawing a pool of blood. The dog yelped in pain, then crouched behind Ollie's legs. She was no coward. Ollie had once seen her take a mastiff down, but her sense of family loyalty extended to cats, and she would not attack Narnia. Since the Jeep was still in the shop, Ollie decided to ferry the cat to the animal shelter. It was going to be man and dog the way it had been before he even met Kate. He felt his chin. John had not left a razor. Ollie unlocked the shed where he kept the paddle and blinked in the darkness. A cold wind blew through the cracks, skittering dead leaves around his feet, then slammed the door shut behind him. He breathed deeply, must and rot, gasoline, oil, wet rope, and the winter smell of chilled life waiting underground. Batting his hand along the wall, he found a lamp that hung on a nail. He struck a match. Batteries rusted out here. A yellow circle expanded on the back wall. Inside sat a barn owl, Taito alba. It had a white, heart-shaped face, like something a kid would draw with a magic marker. Black eyes. "Who?" said Ollie. Inside the heart, the owl blinked. Wind blew the boat starboard. Ollie rowed against it. The creek was black and salty and ran into other creeks that seeped out of the ocean like webbed fingers. He'd heard that you could get all over the island on this waterway, but he'd never tried it. Birds bobbed in the wind, and the empty muscadine vines crackled and scraped against the dwarfed trees. He heard the shriek heat of a boat-tailed grackle, and when he drew the canoe along shore, he saw it perched on a vine. In the gray sky, its feathers flashed an iridescent green. The bird looked at him with pale, ghostly eyes. Then with a harsh, rustling sound like the flushing of a toilet, it flew away. The wind blew Ollie's hat into the water, his lucky hat. "Russian sailor's hat," Kate said, handing it to him that first Christmas after they were married. Turning the dark wool in his hands, he caught a glimpse of himself in her rosy vision. Strong, salty, remote. He'd given her a leather bra that was too big for her. All day they ate pizza in front of a fire and made love. Slowly the hat sank. "With poor Will," called a bird. The Catawba County Animal Shelter smelled like rotten broccoli. Ollie imagined dead cats and dogs shoveled into corners, hovering flies, maggots. "Name?" asked the uniformed man behind the grimy counter. "Ollie Brewster. I mean the cat." Twinkles. Where had that come from? Some kid or little old lady might pick up a cat named Twinkles. Narnia deserved a new life, a break with the past. A stub of pencil appeared in the man's meaty hand. He was writing on the back of an envelope. The smell grew stronger. "Narnia has had all of his shots," said Ollie. "I mean Twinkles has." He rested one foot on the pet carrier as if he meant to claim it. "Has had them." The water dish had spilled on the cat's head. Ollie thought of the wet, skinny kitten trembling in the bottom of his canoe. They go faster with shots. The room was filthy, outdated swimsuit calendar hanging crookedly on the paneled wall, tweed chair with a spring poking out, fish tank filled with empty styrofoam cups and gum wrappers. Ollie couldn't imagine anyone coming in here to look for a pet. "You can keep the cat carrier. Maybe that will make a more attractive package. Say he comes with it." "Will do," said the man, coming around the counter. Ollie knew he wouldn't include the pet carrier with Narnia. He kept his foot planted on it, and the two men looked at each other with dislike. It was dark when he paddled back down the creek, but a shard of moon sent a pale light through the clouds. On the bank, the gnarled limbs of a red swamp bay stretched over the water like a witch's arms. From the pet carrier tied onto the back seat, Narnia set up a screeching yowl that made the hair rise on Ollie's arms. He felt Kate watching him from somewhere. She seemed angry. "I didn't do it," Ollie yelled. "Damn it!" He went home and made a sign. "Free cat to mediocre home." In the morning, ignoring the ringing telephone, he paddled over to the superette to hang the sign on the bulletin board and get some groceries. On the creek, he heard a distant baying and couldn't tell if it was made by dogs or swans. In the store, the harsh fluorescent lights gave him a headache, and he kept bumping into things with his cart. When he saw familiar faces, he ducked his head, suddenly unable to remember anyone's name. There were too many kinds of peanut butter to choose from. His eyes burned from the strain of reading tiny labels. When he saw a sleek young woman in running shoes, cheeks flushed, he grew hot with rage. Why didn't she have ALS? Why not her instead of Kate? He glowered as she picked through a bin of vegetables, examining each green pepper as if she had all the time in the world. Suddenly, she looked up and smiled radiantly as if he'd been admiring her supple body. He jerked his cart down the aisles, randomly tossing things in: chocolate milk, lady fingers, light bulbs, a can of something called Veg-All. When his basket was full, he lurched to the front of the store, but only one cashier was open, and her line ran back into the toilet paper. Fuming, he pulled up behind a fat lady telling her kid, "And I will snatch you into next week." He walked out of the store empty-handed. At home, he ordered a pizza, sausage and onions, Kate's favorite, and split it with Dog Dog and Narnia. Dog Dog barked, and Narnia used the empty carton as a litter box. He erased the phone messages without listening to them, but the phone kept ringing. "So sorry, your Jeep is ready, in our thoughts. The billing department, take some time off, our prayers. Would like to enroll her in Montessori? Peace." When Ollie did pick up the phone, a sugared, robotic voice asked, "May I speak to the lady of the house?" "She's on the mantle," said Ollie. "Excuse me?" "We burned her and put her ashes in an urn, sort of a dark green marble. Could be malachite. Cost $900 just for the pot, and that was on sale," the funeral director said. "Of course, you never know with those people. I mean, who wants to look cheap?" "Maybe this isn't a good time to call," said the voice, and Ollie threw the phone into the trash can. Then he looked around his empty house and roared, "This place is a mess!" Dog Dog, with no furniture to crawl under, slumped into a corner. "I'm sorry," said Ollie, kneeling beside her and pressing his face into the silky fur behind her ear. "I'm sorry, pretty girl." Cautiously, Dog sniffed his neck, then gave him a tentative lick across the cheek. Since he was on his knees, Ollie decided to pray, but after a while he realized he was just talking to himself, so he got up and began to clean the house. Using a bottle of ammonia he'd found in the shed, he scrubbed walls and floors, breathing in the harsh fumes until he was dizzy. The bathroom was the worst. When he got on his hands and knees, he could still find spots of blood on the tile beneath the cabinet from Kate's last fall. She'd clocked in there with her walker. He'd heard her from the bed where he was taking a cat nap. Why won't she use the bucket, he thought irritably. He'd had to blaze a trail in a cold drizzle that day, slashing at thorny catbrier and wet scuppernong that clung to the scythe, jerking up roots sunk deep into the mud, slugging through the whole gluey mess until his shoulders burned with fatigue. He was too tired to get up and help her, but he couldn't relax. One day she would fall. His muscles tensed as he listened to each movement, the precarious turn to face the toilet, her jagged, exhausted breath as she lifted the paralyzed hand with the working hand and placed it like an anchor in the center of the walker. Now the hard part, she was fumbling with the bathrobe. He knew where the beads of sweat had started to form at her temples, how they would gather and drip down her face in rivulets that she could not wipe away. Were he to go in there, she would flash her eyes at him, refuse his arm. 3 seconds ticked by. Impatiently, he rolled over. She should be ready now, holding on to the center of the walker with the good hand, calling up all the powers of her limp biceps, summoning the flaccid quadriceps and her bony thighs to an Olympic feat squat. The muscles in Ollie's back knotted together, and he panted with her. "I will not open my eyes," he told himself. "I am tired." Slam! Her body toppled like a board. Her head smacked the tile floor. The long, thin scream of pain sounded as if it came from someone else, a child or an old woman. "Kate," he answered, stumbling into the bathroom. She was on her back with her pajama pants around her knees, face white, a pool of dark blood spreading beneath her head. Her words were incomprehensible. He couldn't find a towel. Had he forgotten to do the laundry? In his bare feet, he slipped in her blood, hit his chin on the toilet seat. The thick red puddle grew around him. They were yelling at each other, her voice a frantic gurgle, his a bellowing horn. He tore off his shirt, wrapped it around her head, panicking as the blood soaked through the pale cotton. She grew still, intent on something above him. "I can't understand you," he cried when she tried to tell him what she saw. He looked at the white ceiling, half expecting God, but there was nothing. Adamant, pissed off that he didn't see it, her hand flapped by her side, trying to point. When the ambulance arrived, the medics insisted on tying her to a board. "You can't," he screamed at them, watching her sob. "She doesn't have any fat. It hurts her. You're pressing her bones. You don't need to do this. She's already paralyzed." But rules were rules, so they tightened the buckles. Later, in the hospital, she was able to tell him that the top hinge on the bathroom door was crooked. That's why it squeaked. One evening, Ollie put the pet carrier in the canoe and rowed out to Sammy's bar, hoping to find someone drunk enough to take the cat off his hands. He looped his boat line around a musclewood tree that glowed blue from a neon sign over the back door of the bar, tied it with a mooring hitch, and squatted down on the bank. Wrapping his hand around the narrow tree trunk, he thought of Kate's back before she was sick, smooth and taut and warm on their sheets. "Am I dying?" she had asked him that last night. "No," he said stupidly, "I don't think so." A nurse was there, someone new. He went to get a cup of coffee. When he returned to the bedroom with his coffee, she had shat herself and was unconscious. He knelt beside her, holding her head, whispering frantically in her ear, "Wait, honey, wait a minute, just a second, I'm not ready." He looked up, startled, when the nurse turned off the oxygen tank. "I thought you knew," she said, "she's passed." Dead, Kate looked nothing like she did when she was alive, not even when she was asleep. She looked dead. The nurse closed her eyelids. Where had she gone? He looked up through the tangled vines at the fading sky. The human body is worth $1.78, she told him once. He was always trying to figure out what she meant, in parts, wholesale, in ashes. Well, if it ain't shark bait, yelled Sammy, red in the face from drinking his own bourbon. How you been, man? He slapped a cold Dr. Pepper on the bar in front of Ollie. Everything all right down at the house? He said this in a strange, somber tone, an offer of condolence. Yeah, except for this extra cat. I was thinking of bringing it over here. What the hell I need a cat for? Rats, suggested Ollie. Hey, don't I get a glass? You want a cocktail napkin and a cherry on the toothpick? Go across the street with the tourists. They got rats over there. This place needs a cat, Sammy. You know, for atmosphere. Give you some class. Mick here gives me about all the class I can stand. Ain't that right, Mick? Mick grinned toothlessly and began telling about the time he tied a firecracker to a cat's tail. Treetop said, man, I'm sorry about your wife, and tried to buy him a whiskey. You know he quit drinking, said Sammy, with his eyes shining. Ollie could see that he was about to tell the old story, but just then a woman wearing a halter shoved up to the bar. Me too, she slurred. For an instant, the thick voice reminded Ollie of Kate. He looked at her, breasts sagging beneath the pink spandex, dark roots showing through dry yellow hair. You two what? Asked Mick, ogling her chest. Everything! Laughing, she slammed her glass down, sloshing the drink across the bar. Vern, you're getting sloppy, said a deep voice behind them. Ollie recognized him, the Salvation Army guy, and looked away. Hey, said Vern, leaning close and breathing boozy breath into the side of his face. Hey, you. Said Ollie. Ain't he ugly? She said in a loud whisper. Ollie signaled for another Dr. Pepper. And you know what? She waited for him to ask, and when he didn't, she winked. He's got a pecker the size of a... Looking coyly over Ollie's shoulder at her man, she wiggled her pinky finger. A thick, hairy arm, showing the flash of a green tattoo, reached between them, and Vern was lifted over Ollie's head. The men at the bar turned on their stools, hooting as the man, John, Ollie remembered, shouldered Vern and walked out the back door. Real men love Jesus, said Mick, reading the back of the leather jacket before the door shut. Y'all ever wonder why Jesus didn't have a girlfriend? Let me buy you a real drink, Ollie, said Treetop. Quit nagging him, said Sammy. You sound like my wife. His wife, Chelsea, had just walked in the front door with a broom. But not as purty, said a man down the bar, ducking the swipe of the broom. I got most of the glass up, said Chelsea. What I could see in the dark. Don't you let those boys bring their bottles out there. Last time they fined us $400. How are you, Ollie? Fine. He looked into her worn, familiar face and forced a smile. As her eyes lingered on him, he felt the question in her mind, flopping like a fish. It would be terrible if she mentioned Kate, and terrible if she didn't. I will not blubber at the bar, he told himself, squeezing his Dr. Pepper can. Her face drew up into a pained expression of embarrassment and sorrow. Sorry about your wreck, honey. People all over town have been saying they seen you in the skiff. She laughed, a short bark that made her eyes sparkle. Nobody ever thought of that before. I thought of it, said Mick, just never done it. I tried to buy him a real drink, said Treetop, who was beginning to sway. Some men might be cheered to lose a wife, but he lost a good one. He and Kate was in love, ain't that right, Ollie? Quit nagging him, said Sammy. Why don't you go home and go to bed? Got to find me a girl to go to bed with. Lord, said Chelsea, we'll be here all night. Cats are nice to sleep with, suggested Ollie. I got a warm one out back. Chelsea put her arm around him. At the touch of her soft body, smelling of something flowery, his senses leapt and recoiled. He had not felt the touch of a woman in almost 2 months. Although Chelsea, in her mid-50s with dyed red hair, crooked yellow teeth, and spotted hands, was nothing like Kate, her touch was feminine, and he felt his aloneness was fresh, stinging pain. Listen, she said, we'll find you somebody. I know some nice girls. Don't go out with her niece, said Sammy. She's got hair in her ears. You hush that. Who's got hair in her ears? I hope you don't mean Susan. Are you talking about my sister's little girl, Susan? With a sideways grin, Sammy leaned over the bar and said, you know what Chelsea got her last Christmas? One of them little battery-operated hair snippers. You shut up, Samuel. You think you come from a line of royalty? Well, I am here to tell you. It went on and on, all around Ollie. It was like the dream he'd had before Kate died, people moving in shadows, as close as his nose, but so far away. He walked out the back door to get some fresh air. It was early February, but he could smell the beginning of spring beneath the raw muck smell of the creek and the faint, salty odor of the sea. Spring. He could feel it beneath the soles of his boots, almost like a vibration. The coiled sea lavender, pokeweed, and cotton bushes arching against the frail backs of their seeds, swollen with waiting. With a particular ray of sun, a certain splat of rain, in an hour known only to God, their cages would spring open, and the seedlings, driven by the unbidden and incessant will to live, would nudge their way up through the old tired earth, up and up and up, to the eyes of the world. Life, a secret shift in the order of the universe. All around him in the chill darkness he felt it, even heard it, the sleepy buzz of awakening earwigs and ghost shrimp. He heard a splash in the water, deep for a raccoon, he thought, and then from the creek, a slap and the piercing scream of a woman. Fucking cunt, yelled the Salvation Army man standing precariously in Ollie's canoe, which had somehow drifted off the bank. The woman replied in a muffled slur, holding his leather jacket over her face for protection. Well, at least she has something to keep her warm, Ollie thought, striding to the bank. Hey, he called out, sounding like a cop. Get out of there. He stood on the shore, waving his arm at them, but they ignored him. Get out, the woman was saying, as if Ollie's canoe were her house. Get out of here right now. Two people who deserve ALS, thought Ollie. The line was still attached to the musclewood, and he began to tow them in. Hey, yelled John, wobbling with his arms outstretched. Boat party's over, said Ollie. This is my ride. You let go of that rope. I'll sink this tub. He's insane, the woman shrieked. He's trying to kill me. Ollie continued to draw the canoe in, hand over hand. He gave the line a final jerk, and the huge man toppled backward, flipping the canoe straight up into the air as he smacked the water. Yow! Cried the woman, flailing her arms, wet hair hanging like rags in her face. Freezing! My jacket, yelled John. Where's my jacket, you bitch? Then Ollie remembered Narnia. He jumped into the water, heart knocking against the icy shock. Underwater, he spread his arms, feeling for the cage. It was dangerous to swim in these brackish waters, worse than the ocean. Strange currents whirled beneath the surface, and the bed was full of snares, branches, fishing nets, lines, tangled garden hoses, sometimes barbed wire. In the middle of the creek, the water was about 10 feet deep, but he was afraid to dive. His wet boots and jeans pulled him under, but he couldn't seem to stay down long enough to drag the bottom. He came up, ears splitting, gulped air, and sank. Something jerked at his shirt tail. Shark, he thought, trying not to thrash as he spun around to face it. Once someone had caught a baby tiger shark in the backwater, but that was rare. Through the murky water, he made out the hairy face of his predator. They rose to the surface together and dog paddled. You seen my jacket? John asked Ollie. It's got to be in here. He yelled to his woman crawling up the bank to get back in the water and help him look, but she shot him the bird and stomped back to the bar. She's going to get her walking papers, he moaned, pushing some hair out of his eyes to see Ollie better. Don't I know you? Yeah, you're the guy who gave away all that stuff. What are you looking for? A cat? The man raised his thick eyebrows. He looked comical in the water, with his long hair plastered down, the ends swimming around his shoulders like minnows, a seaweed called mermaid hair stuck in his craw. Man, you are one ugly mermaid, said Ollie, and suddenly they laughed, belting their voices out over the silent water. That night, Ollie dreamed of Narnia drowning in the pet carrier. The blue crabs came, singing beautiful swimmer, as they turned sideways to slide between the bars, covering Narnia until he was bright blue. Then he was standing over Kate, who lay paralyzed on the blue plastic sheet of a hospital bed. Waving a butcher knife, he said, "You are dying of carbon monoxide poisoning. You are doing this to yourself." Then, he was never sure if this was in the dream or out of it, something shrieked. It was joined by another piercing scream, and then another and another, until there was a caterwaul that left him hollow, cold, and wide awake. John began to come by the house. Since his girlfriend had left him, he seemed to think he and Ollie had something in common. Ollie let him in so often that Dog stopped growling at the rattle of the truck in the driveway, and sometimes they went out in Ollie's canoe. "You're one of them whatchamacallits, naturalists, ain't you?" John asked one day. He was amazed to learn that Ollie got paid for catching frogs, and further awed that the work required some kind of degree. Ollie offered John $2 a frog, and they began to lumber through the salt marsh together. One afternoon in April, when they were walking along a dirt road, Ollie stopped at a puddle in a tire track. In the shallow, muddy water, 2 frogs were mating. At first, it was hard to see the male, who looked like a blue shadow on the back of the bulging female. He explained to John how the thumb pads on the male's feet enlarged during mating season, so that he would be able to hold on to the female. He pointed out the small raft of bubbles, each clear globe encasing a tiny black tadpole. Somberly, they watched the copulation. Ollie expected a crude remark from John, or a yawn, but the big man knelt beside the puddle and studied the frogs with keen eyes. When he stood up, he said, "You know, it's true, we're just hanging on." On a hot night in June, Kate came to Ollie in a dream. She was wearing the sleeveless white cotton nightgown he loved, with those 2 long twisted satin ribbons always untied at the throat and falling across her breasts. Her army green helmet was cocked sideways, the way she wore a hat. There was a single smudge of dirt on her nose. He tried to call her name, but it caught in his throat. She laughed, came toward him. Slowly he edged forward, afraid she would disappear if he got too close. Her eyes, her smile, her entire body glowed with excitement, their meeting like this, sneaking over the wall of death. The narrowing space between them was yes, yes, yes. Trembling, ecstatic, he knelt before her. He remembered getting his arms around her before his eyes opened to the blank wall of the empty bedroom. Later that week, while John was grilling a catch of bluefish he'd brought by, Ollie showed him a photograph, a black and white glossy of Kate leaning back on a ratty old couch, nude and smiling. John wiped his hands on his pants before he touched it. After a moment, he said, "She ain't too hard on the eyes." Then, with his face modestly averted, he handed the picture back to Ollie. Ollie didn't know why he'd shown it to John. There were things he wanted to tell somebody, but he couldn't find a way. The words for grief seemed as standard and artificial as funeral flowers. She didn't die, she passed. Love, too, had a formula. She had never locked Ollie out of the house, and he had never banged on the door screaming, "I'll burn the house down with you in it." How could he describe the calls that had peeled away from her layer by layer until her face was finally naked, and he had to fight the urge to hide himself, as men are said to do in the presence of angels? After this happened, no matter what he said to her, even if it was a rude, ugly thing, she said, "I love you." When she could no longer form the words, she would touch her heart and point to him. John wanted to see if the loggerhead turtles lay their eggs. "You never know when they'll come to shore," said Ollie. "It's really a waste of time." "They come during the full moon," said John, flipping through the pages of a used field guide he'd found at the Salvation Army. "I read that in here somewhere." He pushed a pair of bent, wire-framed glasses up on his nose, another Salvation Army find that Ollie suspected was purely for effect. "They carry this mental map in their tiny brains, connecting them to all the magnetic forces of the earth," said John. "They have them a built-in miniature GPS. Is God cool or what? And you know what they do with it?" He paused, tapping his book. "Man, they go home, right back to where they was born and have their babies. It's a circle, see?" He drew a big circle in the air and clapped his hands too close to Ollie's ear. "I'm busy that night," said Ollie, who could imagine nothing more painful than being on a moonlit beach with John and not Kate. He'd He'd come to consider John as his student, a big, clumsy, bright kid, and he was happy to show him everything he knew about the island, but the loggerheads were sacred to him. Somehow his memory of Kate was inextricably bound with turtle eggs. He had no intention of sharing this with John, not even after his supervisor instructed him to put protective cages over the eggs as soon as the loggerheads laid them. Dutifully, he drove out to the beach every night, and on the full moon, as he was packing the cages into the back of his Jeep, John's truck whipped into his driveway, blinding him with headlights. "Yahoo!" cried the big man, grinning from ear to ear. "I was afraid I'd miss you." A cheap pair of binoculars hung around his neck, and he carried a beach towel. "Get in," said Ollie, cursing himself in his loneliness. Dressed in Bermuda shorts that were too tight for him and a T-shirt announcing, "Satan is an asshole," John paced in a circle around Ollie, whispering some gibberish about the second coming interspersed with factoids about sea turtles. The combination of LSD and fundamentalist Sunday school, Ollie imagined telling Kate, has produced this miracle of human development. He pushed his glasses up on his nose. John did the same. He looked out over the sand, smooth and golden in the moonlight, curving into the dark mystery of the tide that seemed to say, "Hush, hush," as it washed over the shore. "Hush, hush, shoosh." One night, waiting in the cord grass for the turtles, Ollie and Kate had stripped. She did it first, the thin T-shirt rolling over her face, arms akimbo, round breasts milky bare, shorts with panties inside slipping down the exquisite curve of her hips and her strong legs, exposing the dark triangle of hair. Sitting naked beside her, he smelled the maddening scent of her, something not quite bayberry, but he didn't touch her. They sat about 3 feet apart, legs crossed like yogis, looking at the distance. John belched. "Being out here kind of makes you think, don't it? I mean, about earth and heaven." He paused. "And hell." He looked around, scratched his balls, then settled himself beside Ollie. "You know what I was thinking? I was thinking that when those turtles come out of the water, it will be like they was baptized." "We probably won't see any turtles," Ollie said flatly. "I know it. I was just thinking that." "Souls," John said loudly, but to himself. "Souls on the beach, in the moonbeams of the Lord's heart." "I have a responsibility to turn him into a naturalist," thought Ollie, "so he won't be a preacher." But he was glad not to be alone. Sometimes when he was alone, he would say to himself, as if tearing at a wound, "You will never see Kate again." Then he would feel the pain, stab after stab, and say it again and again and again, amazed that it didn't leave a mark on his body. It was hard to believe that death happened all the time to everybody. "John," he said, "I want to tell you—" "Shh," said John, melding his voice into the swoosh of the tide. He was leaning forward, hands squeezed into lumpy fists, straining his eyes against the dark curl of the surf. "You come out of there," he whispered. "Come on." A breeze came up, stirring the sea oats behind them. An empty cup rolled at their feet. A tangle of long, greasy hair blew across John's face, and he didn't touch it, just sat frozen, watching. Barely perceptible from the wave, a glistening green shell rose and fell. After a moment, the scaly head, knotted like mussel wood, writhed up out of the water, and on the sand, slowly the legs uncoiled. There was the first mama, leaving tractor tracks in the sand as she crawled up the beach. Around and around she turned in her chosen spot, like a dog getting ready to lie down. And at some unfathomable signal, she began to dig. Down, down, down into the earth she went with her belly full of eggs. The moon shone down, the surf rocked back and forth, and still the beasts came out of the water, one after another, slowly and with great dignity, as if they were bearing gifts.